I would say, well, that's where humanity is screwing up religion. I feel like we're applying our daily struggles and what's going on in our world and looking for religion to substantiate the decisions we've made.
Throw a dart at the wall and draw a target around it.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Talk number 3 on is Christianity left or right? And again, the goal here is not to solve the political issues, but to really ask the question of perception. The two folks that are having this conversation are Andy Suggs and Brian Oakes. Andy?
Yeah, I'm Andy Suggs. I think that I probably represent the group of listeners who maybe didn't grow up in the most organized religious environment.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
I love it. And I grew up in the, well, I didn't actually grow up in the organized church. I really didn't even discover the church until I was really after college, after Heather and I got married. But I was in the organized religious environment. So I have my perceptions of what Christianity is, and then there are those who are not within the organized religious world that have their perceptions. And then we look at these political pieces, and what we have from diffin.com, which are 9 categories. When we talked about being left, we looked at these 9 categories broken down into 2 parts, personal and social. So I've reorganized them because these 9 categories are described differently for the left than they are for the right. The only 2 that in my opinion, are apples to apples are abortion and gay rights. But then the other 7, healthcare, education, voter ID, immigration, economy, gun rights, and environment, as I read through them, they do not look like apples to apples. They look like they're talking about very different issues. So today we're talking about these 9 issues on the right perspective of it, and really what do we do with Christianity in that? Do Christian beliefs describe them? Do they describe Christian beliefs? Is that?
Yeah, I would agree.
The 3 categories that we've broken them down into are moral, government philosophy, personal freedom. Underneath moral is abortion and gay rights. Underneath government philosophy is healthcare, education, voter ID, immigration. And underneath personal freedom is economy, gun rights, and environment. I realize that these are not reduced down to these specifically, that for some people, all 9 are moral. The same way on the left side, people say, well, of course the environment's moral, of course education's moral, but just to give them some sense of organization, abortion and gay rights from a right perspective are considered moral. From a Christian perspective, it seems pretty clear that abortion and gay marriage are addressed within the scriptures, and so I've categorized them as moral. And please, Andy, feel free to disagree and be like, you're a moron. Education is totally a moral thing. Some people are going to see environment. Of course environment's moral. But
well, I think we touched on this a little bit in our last conversation. I think depending on where you are in the country and your community, that would really drive how you'd segment these. I think if you're in a community where free education, free healthcare is much more important, obviously that's going to be a hotter topic than, say, here in Roswell.
Yeah.
Where I think, you get into a lot of, you hear people talking more about gun rights and some of those bigger conversations of abortion and gay rights. So yeah, I think this is a good way to segment it, but I think it also gives a nod to our community and kind of our own situation.
Man, some people are going to hate me for saying this, but things like voter ID don't seem as weighty as abortion
until people start to argue.
But what if you're the guy? What if you're the guy who's trying to feed for his family?
Right. Or You believe
I show my cards a lot with it, don't I?
But if you believe that the government official was elected because they benefited from illegal voting,
That's a good point.
and now they're making decisions because they have that power that don't agree with how I view, then voter ID becomes a much bigger
Yeah.
topic for me. Because I feel what's starting to happen, though, is like if you think about the topic of government-funded healthcare is extremely important to a segment of our society that needs that government provided to live and provide for their family. So they're going to vote for whoever is taking that stance. And that's where these topics become incredibly important.
Yeah, I mean, environment. How dare you? Like
Right.
Greta Thunberg, however you pronounce her name. Like,
Oh, yeah.
That's huge. Like, what if we're going to trash the planet? Who cares about this?
Exactly.
In some sense, you and I are completely missing the boat by diminishing any of these because
Sure.
gun rights. You go talk to somebody at Sandy Hook and you start talking to
Exactly.
them
Right.
about how irrelevant
Yeah.
those things are.
Yep.
You are pro-life and you don't care about what happens at elementary school. You go put your kid in that school.
Yeah.
And you say, flip it on immigration.
Yep.
Oh, there's genocide happening. This isn't something on a little tiny screen on your kitchen counter. What's happening parts of Central America? What's happening across the Middle East? And you're indifferent because you can turn your AC on up and down in the way that you like it to go.
Yeah. Right.
A slope. For me, on the high side is really important. On the low side is not so important.
Sure.
My faith ought to inform the entire slope. My faith should inform everything. It should inform what kind of attitude I have today. How do I handle my money? How do I treat my wife? How do I treat you?
Right.
Man. Personal freedoms then. Economy, gun rights, and environment. Gun rights opposed to gun control laws, proponents of the Second Amendment, which is in contrast to background checks and waiting periods for buying a gun. I mean, those are, I know that they're kind of the same thing, but
Yeah, this is where I tend to lean more left, personally, in my beliefs. I think when you look at gun rights, I don't feel that how the laws were originally written apply to how the reality of guns you can buy today. However, I totally get the idea of you're protecting yourself. But then I look at economy, and I probably tend to lean a little bit more towards the right.
lower taxes, less regulation on business. You are a business owner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Reduce government spending, balanced budget.
Yeah.
From a right perspective.
But probably more towards the middle than I would even say than gun rights. So, this is where I start to struggle with connecting religion to politics.
What do you mean struggle with?
I think because there's no, you're either this or that, and I think that that's where I, as an individual, have difficulty labeling myself Christian because of the other assumptions that come along with it.
Yeah.
I know we've touched on this before, but that's where I feel like, people on the ends of the spectrum, left or right, leverage religion to be, well, yeah, but you're Christian, so you should feel this way.
Yeah. How can you be Christian and be against guns?
That comes back to my personal struggle that I've always had throughout my entire life of organized religion and all that comes along with those labels. I think when you get to the core truth of what Christianity is and your belief in Jesus Christ, then people start attaching things to that. And I think that that's where religion is weaponized.
I want to lean in on that one because
Sure.
this is one I thought we were going to gloss over, but I'm curious about environment. Still underneath this category, personal freedom. Consider economic impact of environmental regulations. The belief that free markets will find solutions to environmental problems. I think part of what's happening there on the right-hand side is this thought that when people are liberated, they will choose good for society.
Well, and I think if you look at the history of humanity, I think for the most part that's been true. You know, the big topic right now is FEMA, the financial support that they offer or that they are able to wield, you know, in the communities that need it. And then you hear post-hurricane, and you hear about, you know, $5 million for this fire out west, and you know, $50 million for this hurricane, and then you hear that the FEMA spent $4 billion in 1 month on COVID, and it's like, okay, so, well, that's opening up Pandora's box. So what does that mean? You know, I'm sure there's a huge backstory to that, but as a general member of society, when you hear that, it's just like, oh my gosh, you know, where's that money going, or what other efforts or causes are being grouped under that title of COVID, where people are, you know, leveraging that need, like catastrophes going on.
Okay. So environment is not just clean oceans, but post.
It's a kind of, if you think about economy, economy comes into play there. But I think for the focus, what you're intending, we live in a society now where unfortunately people have lied and manipulated facts and studies for their own personal gain. And that's where I feel that, honestly, a lot of these arguments stem from.
You said this in the last talk. Who in their right mind wouldn't want to help somebody who's hurting?
Right.
When you know the good. So the question is benevolence.
Right.
You know, and it seems like that to be is the dividing line. And so I leave this group of guys this morning, and they're talking about sending aid to folks in North Carolina.
Right.
They need aid. We know they need aid.
Right.
Should that aid come from FEMA or should it come from smaller groups? And if you read just this at face value, the right side is the aid shouldn't necessarily come from the larger government institutions, but free markets will find it themselves. Is that Christian? I disagree with that. I think Christians should do that. I think Christians should send aid, but I don't believe that a Christian view is left to themselves, mankind will just do good to mankind. At the same time, I don't see the scripture saying that we need to have oversight of it. I just don't think that the scriptures are teaching us that left to their own devices, mankind will do good to itself.
Honestly, I would agree with that too. But I think I'm coming from a much less educated or schooled perspective on Christianity.
Well, yes and no,
Okay.
because this is about perception. I mean, I can tell you what they would say in seminary or what they would say in the New Testament, the Old Testament, but at the same time, politically right and left is a perception because it's about how our beliefs shaping our culture.
Yeah.
And we can move up to the philosophical pieces here of healthcare. And if I'm pushing too quick,
No.
Healthcare, education, voter ID. I mean, healthcare, oppose government-provided universal healthcare and the Affordable Care Act.
It's honestly, I think, coming from, you know, where I feel I am in my life and my community. This is all so complicated. It's very difficult for me personally to have a strong stance one way or the other, because I feel like there's so much that goes into that statement of, are you against or for government provided health care?
Yeah. How do I care for my neighbor?
Yeah, and I think it comes down to your personal experiences. If you see and know, members in your community who are suffering because of, the situation that they were born into, or, mental issues or health issues. But when you are in a community where you see people leveraging the system to their advantage, manipulating it, benefiting from the taxes and government provided support, then there's a resentment that builds up.
Yeah.
Where I come back to is make a difference in your, think about your local community and what can you do to do what you feel is right for what's best in your neighborhood.
It's the challenge of love your neighbor and stewardship. Mm-hmm. Because you can't just say, oh, love your neighbor, right, to the point that you're not being a good steward of the resources that are in your hand, which is what I think you're driving at.
Right.
But at the same time, we can so over steward that we forget we can't qualify love, because love itself is to give without the expectation of return.
Sure.
Christianity reduced down is unmerited love.
Agreed.
Love has been given to me and I don't deserve it. And so I am to live that way to my neighbor.
Well, and I think where it comes back around is like, are those decisions that you're making indirectly affecting your own family because financial gain that others are benefiting from that are compromising your own ability to provide better opportunities and care for your own family members?
Which is that is a politically right view. Education. Parents wanting to homeschool or send kids to private school, they should be able to have vouchers for opting out of public school systems, sure, which does not seem to be in contrast to the left view. Free, expanded public education,
sure,
for all.
Sure.
You could hold both the left and the right view on that.
I would 100% agree, because I could defend and argue the right statement there. Mm-hmm. There are communities where that free, expanded public health education is going to be a huge benefit. Then I can also see communities where there are a lot of people who came here illegally, mm-hmm, and they're benefiting from I'm speaking from that person's perspective, the money that I'm paying to the government to provide education for individuals, where that money could be going into other areas that would benefit people who are contributing to our community. Now, then lies the argument, well, what about the people who are trying to get out of a really negative situation in Mexico, and they want to come and contribute and provide better for their family? 100%. Okay.
Yep.
And I feel like, unfortunately, the processes that we set up for people to come legally into the U.S., then there's arguments on how is that done. But then there's also the people who come over here only for the financial gain. Mm-hmm. They know how the system's set up and they leverage that to their advantage.
Would you not do the same?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question, because it's how can you put yourself in that position?
Yeah.
I mean,
but should that be your burden?
Exactly. Right. And I mean, that's the beauty and the curse of living in the U.S.
Yeah.
And I think what we're seeing, a lot of these conversations and arguments are byproducts of how our society and the conversations and the decisions that we have to make don't align well with the foundation of how our government and our Constitution was written. I mean, it's not the best example, but I come back to that commercial I talked about before about gun law.
The musket guy.
The musket guy who runs into an office to start shooting people. When the law was written, it took you a minute or two to load another bullet before you could do anything. And now you can walk in and kill a few hundred people in 30 seconds.
Well, I think the same thing would be for immigration, is that immigration was fundamentally different.
Absolutely.
When the country was founded versus when it's now, and there actually is a completely different infrastructure than there was.
I catch myself because like I'll watch the news and I'll hear and see what's going on around the world. I'm like, oh my gosh, I am so blessed to have been born in America. And coming from a very non-religious upbringing, although, as you well know, I've always had that call and that pull to learn more and have a relationship with God.
The drift, part of what the push for me is I feel a social drift that the right is the Christian people and then the left are the non-Christian, at least within the American South.
Sure.
And I know that is way oversimplification. I think that is broken view, and I believe that you can hold left views and follow Christ, and you can hold right views and follow Christ, and vice versa. You could.
And I think if it really came down to it, and you were to challenge someone on that, like, what's the core of Christianity? It's not these topics.
Right.
It's, do you believe in Jesus Christ?
But people leave church communities because of differences over these.
I would say, well, that's where humanity is screwing up religion. You know, I feel like we're applying our daily struggles and what's going on in our world and looking for religion to substantiate the decisions we've made.
Ooh. Throw a dart at the wall and draw a target around it?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So rather than me come to you and say, you know what, Brian, I feel that, you know, gay marriage should be okay, and here's why, and here's, if you read this part of the Bible, this is what they've meant. And I'm, again, weaponizing my religion to reinforce my stance. Because otherwise it's a personal choice versus like, well, it's not my choice, this is what the Bible said.
It's funny how we hold up America as a proof of the value of Christian ethic. Many people would say, well, they would contrast against China, and at the same time, there is a independence of America is a champion of independence, of entrepreneurship, of individuality. We're definitely an individualistic culture, and that vending machine concept is opposite of a Christian idea, and that I can just go up, select what I want, and create my own world, because Christianity is about submission.
Right, yeah.
I'm
yeah.
submitting to some other authority that gets to have put in the parameters of my life. I am not my own. My life does not belong to me. My life is for another. I would suggest that idea that I am not my own should inform these issues. Healthcare, education, voter ID, immigration. My faith should speak into these, but these things should not shape my faith. And it's okay for them to be on the left side or on the right side.
No, I agree. And I think it comes back to when you say you submit yourself, what does that mean? Because I think you can interpret that differently.
That's the conversation that needs to be had.
Right.
What do you submit yourself to?
Right.
I think that's a much healthier conversation than, you know what, you tell me where you are. How did you vote, Randy?
Right.
Did you vote for Trump?
Oh yeah.
You know, we're not going to be buddies.
I'm getting the text messages from people in my contacts.
Oh yeah. If you don't live in Georgia, you don't know what it is to live in a purple state.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.